Welcome back to RSAC Conference 2025. We're here recording live from the Cyber Risk TV studio in Broadcast Alley at Moscone West. I'm your host, Matt Alderman, and joining me for this interview is Vishal Gupta, CEO at Seclor. Welcome, Vishal.
Thanks a lot, Matt, for having me.
So we predicted earlier today when we kicked the show off that we would be talking a lot about artificial intelligence.
What?
Really? Who would have thunk it?
I would have never guessed that.
So we're going to talk AI, AI security a little bit.
Right.
Let's start with the problem statement, right? So LLMs get really popular with OpenAI, ChatGPT, it's all the rage. Everybody's trying to figure out how can I use this stuff, right?
Right.
So we see some really early experiments of people trying to figure out how to leverage LLMs to
Right.
build something.
Yeah.
And then everybody went, wait a minute, we haven't thought about security, so I'm going to put a policy in place that basically says, no, you can't use those things
Right.
without some controls around them, right? And so we saw this big hype early on, then we kind of saw this lull. Where are we now? Just in general, like, what are you seeing out there from a usage perspective?
I think within enterprises, we see conflicts, right? Which is the productivity teams which are saying, hey, here are the big things that you can do with AI in general, LLMs more specifically, and so on. And then the security team comes in with a big Mr. No, right? Hey,
Wait,
don't
we're not
do this.
supposed to do that anymore.
Yeah, exactly. There you go, right? So there is a conflict here within enterprises between the productivity, let's say, gains potentially of AI versus the security risks. And right now they are getting reflected in one of these two teams winning, right? Either the business says, no, we just want to go out and explore the cost benefits, the potential upside of AI, and we are ready to live with the risks. Or they're saying, no, let's just stop AI adoption till the time we figured out this whole security and compliance piece around AI, right? So right now there's just complete polarization within the enterprise between the two extremes. And I think that's where there's a little bit of a standoff, for lack of a better word, in the enterprise world around AI adoption.
Because what I see is the business side of the house wants to figure out how to use it to innovate and drive revenue.
Yeah.
The security teams want to make sure it's secure.
Yeah.
But I can tell you from a risk quant perspective, because I do a little bit of risk quant in my day job, it's really hard to justify stopping revenue growth for maybe a potential risk, and I think we're still trying to figure out what that risk is. And so what I see a little bit, I don't disagree with you, but how can the security teams in the organization on the business side figure out how to use LLMs and AI in an effective way that doesn't create a lot of extra risk? And so that leads me into some really interesting questions like, what are the best models to use, right? Because if you think about it, when DeepSeek came out, a month and a half ago, the industry freaked out, right? They're like, whoa, DeepSeek was tuned at something like a tenth of the cost. Anyways, so DeepSeek created this really interesting dilemma in the market all of a sudden for people. But then you read the T's and C's and they're like, yeah, we're sending all this data to China. It's going to our servers in China, right? That's a security risk. As a security professional, I'd be like, stop. So how do you, I'm just trying to figure out how do you then create that balance? Do you see policies in place that are like, look, we can't use anything from these countries. We can only use these models because we know that they have protections. Is that?
It's not viable.
Okay.
Putting controls on AI adoption to say only these models and only these systems and only these countries and so on, it's digital finally, right? So the idea of a country itself becomes a little hazy, right?
Yeah.
Right. What do you call data going to China, right? Maybe the server is hosted somewhere else. Maybe the US company's server is hosted in Hong Kong, for example, right? And so on. So doing all of this is just too messy in my opinion.
Okay.
Right? But if you just go back and do a little back in time, and I'm older than I look, by the way, but the challenge is that if you see, there was the same conflict in many other technology adoptions in the early cycle, right? So when personal devices came into work, right? I want to bring in my phone, I want to bring in my iPad into work, right? And so on. The security team was saying, no, let me give you the device and so on, and you'd work with this. the enterprise adoption of cloud, right? Initial responses were no. We'll host the CRM system, we'll host the ERP system, right? We'll do everything, right? And then the productivity gains of cloud adoption just won. Right, and then the security team had to adapt itself to saying, okay, now we are going to also protect cloud applications or personal devices or public networks, and right, and so on. So there is a pattern over there that finally productivity productivity goals will win. It just takes time for security and compliance to catch up, right, to that stage, right? So peaking forward, maybe even 2 years, right? Normally I would have said 5 years, but 5 years like next generation, right?
At the rate we're going,
Yeah, exactly, right? So if you peak in even 2 years forward, chances are that every enterprise would have deployed AI in a very, very meaningful way. And the security and the compliance team will just have to
suck it up,
figure it out, right? And we have a view at Seclor, we have a view of what that world looks like, right? But the reality is there is no way you can compromise on security. There is no way you can compromise on productivity and revenue goals.
Agreed.
In the name of security.
I agree 100%. The business will always win.
Yeah.
And I think that's what security professionals have to understand. The business is going to win.
Right.
Because business guys run the business and,
exactly.
and they want to win. So.
And guess who pays the salaries?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess what do people do right? So here we are. In 2 years, we've got this under control because we use the mobile device, and so we built the MDM and we built the MAMs. And then in cloud security, we built the CSPMs and we built all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
We're still early into building some of the AI security stuff, and we'll get into that in a second because I know you want to cover that. But what should businesses be doing right now to educate both the business side and the security side around the potential risks of AI?
Education is tough. Especially security education is tough because it's almost like you can get the horse to the water, right? But you can't make it drink it, right? So security education is a very, very high bar for most enterprises because to create personal incentives for people to do security or compliance is a very tall task.
We've been trying this with phishing for how many years and barely moved the needle.
Yeah,
right? Okay,
exactly.
so I'm with you. Yeah.
So what happens is that as Joe from accounting, the only thing I'm interested in is how do I make sure I leave at 4 p.m. to go pick up my kids.
Right.
And security in that scheme of things, security is like number 17 in that priority list, right? So productivity, right, just making sure stuff gets done and so on will win every day of the week. So while education is important, and I'm by no means lessening the importance of education, I think making sure that people's need for involvement and education in the security process goes down, so the bar itself goes down, is where I think security teams' time is best spent, right? So just make sure that it's a low friction, low bar to jump over. What people are doing on a daily basis doesn't meaningfully change, either ideally at all. And security still gets implemented as a transparent technology, which is like, hey, I'm not really doing anything different today than what I was doing yesterday. If security teams can make sure that that ultimate goal is achieved, then the need for security awareness and education goes down. And Joe can go pick up his kids at 4, right? So that's the idea.
So let's talk through a set of recommended steps.
Right.
Company decides we're going to bring in an LLM, and we're going to use this LLM to enhance a business process. We'll leave it at that. Security is not going to have the ability to say no, per se.
Yep.
So what does the security team look at to try to secure with low friction that allows the business to bring that into the environment? Where do they start? What are the basic things they can do to start to build a set of security controls that will help to start to protect the environment?
Yep.
Because two things here. One, they probably don't get any say up front or have very little say up front.
Right.
So they're always going to be coming from behind to try to catch up, right?
Yeah.
So with that in mind, like, where should people kind of focus the efforts then to try to secure these systems?
I think the first thing that I would advise security leaders, and I know you cover communication and those kind of things, is to go from Mr. No to Mr. Yes. Step one, right?
We've been saying that for 6 years on the podcast. Vishal,
Exactly,
so
right?
I'm with
So,
you.
so the first thing that the security teams need to start saying is yes, let's do the AI, let's do the productivity gains, the revenue gains, whatever is the process that needs to be AI enabled, right? Now, and and then really ask themselves what is really required for security, compliance, privacy, and so on. And the answer that they will almost always get is that the only thing that they care about is data. They don't really care about the system or the network or the device or the application in which AI is enabled or any of that, right? They just care about the data, right? And therefore, if there was a way in which security compliance policies can be built into the data itself,
Okay.
now that gives tremendous freedom, because now you can let the data go anywhere, including inside an AI system,
Right.
right? And AI systems have a very poor track record of implementing any sort of controls on data. So if, for example, you let the AI loose, you could query, hey, tell me the CEO's compensation package, and it'll probably tell you.
Yeah.
Or send me the sales team's passport details, and probably tell you, right? And it's scary how many enterprises you could do that. You just go to Copilot and just ask.
So you bring up 2 points, 2 very interesting points. So in 2015, when I wrote the strategy plan for Tenable back in the day, I said the future of security only mattered around 3 controls: application, user, and data controls.
Right.
Data being the holy grail.
Right.
If we could protect data, that's what the hackers are after. The challenge has been, and it exists in this world as well, is if you don't inventory and classify the data, how do you know how to put the protective controls around it? So how do you deal with the inventory and classification side of the data to help protect it? Because that's where everybody struggles.
So it's a 4-step process, right? So the first one is discovery, right? You need to do just discover where your data is going, because it's likely all over the place, right? The second is classification, which you talked about, right? Just being able to say, hey, lunch invitations and forward-looking financial statements are not the same, right? Just as an example, right? And then to be able to apply differential security policies, so the lunch invitation could be public, and the forward-looking financial statement is almost as valuable as the company itself. Right? For a publicly listed company, and so on. And the last but not the least is being able to track data and its usage wherever it goes, including inside an AI application or to a third party, and so on. Right? So in our worldview, as long as enterprises are able to do the discover, classify, protect, and track, right? And it's not a linear thing, it's a circular thing, right? Which is that you need to constantly do that, go back to discover.
Well, and that's my second point. It's not only the input of the data that has to be classified, the output of the data also has to be classified, because you're generating new content that now needs to be protected as well, don't you?
Absolutely, and the amount of content being generated both by humans and by AI systems is just exploding, right? So absolutely, both the input and the output. So our worldview here is that if you are able to protect and classify the input itself, and as long as the AI system respects that inputs, then these black and white choices of yes AI or no AI you can introduce many shades of gray, right? So the obvious the obvious joke missing over there, right? So you can create that 50 shades of gray over here to say, yes, I'm ready to do this much for the AI, and I will introduce this much control for the security and compliance needs, which will be very specific to the business. So what the security team is best off doing is create those choices.
Focus on the data.
Right, absolutely.
Inventory, classify, then enforce data security protections around that, both for the input and the output. And that puts you in the position to say yes.
Absolutely. So, and the last bit is tracking, right? So, so one is complying, and then being able to prove that you are compliant, right? Which are both big jobs.
That was great. Thanks, Vishal.
My pleasure.
To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/Seculor, RSAC. Vishal, thank you very much for joining us.
Great. Thanks a lot, Matt, for having me.
And everyone, stay tuned. We've got more interviews coming from ASC Conference 2025.